Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Growth Rune podcast, where we dive into all the facets of healthcare with experts who are leading the industry. Please join me in welcoming Jason Padgett, the Chief Strategy and Transformation Officer at Phoenix Paramedics. Thank you so much, and we appreciate you for joining us, Jason. Can you please tell us about yourself and what you do at Phoenix Paramedics?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Sal. This is an exciting conversation. It's an exciting time. I am the Chief Strategy and Transformation Officer at a very non-traditional EMS agency located in Lafayette, Indiana. We provide no 911, but we do non-emergency transport, occupational health. So we'll do treat no transport and urine drug screens before hires or after accidents at manufacturing plants in the local area. And then we have a pretty robust behavioral health services, peer-based recovery support, and clinical support for people struggling with mental health or substance use issues. We're such a purpose-driven company that we ended up opening a nonprofit as well. So we have the Phoenix Foundation, where we operate in pretty much three domains: leadership development for people who maybe got a late start in life or in recovery, non-traditional recovery pathways, which is instead of 12-step meetings or more of like exercise-based stuff, things that they do in Colorado and California and Texas that you don't see a lot of in the Midwest, and then some public health education. I serve as the executive director for that. And then I'm in the middle of trying to start my own consulting company to use this design thinking to create better strategy and outcomes for companies and nonprofits.
Wow, very cool. So, what is your workflow like? What's it like to be Jason for a day?
Well, I'm always playing with different technology and trying to streamline that. And I would say when I first started at Phoenix back in 2017, I started as a program manager for the peer-based recovery support stuff. And then it's a company that really likes to move people in directions where they see they have some potential, but maybe not the skill set yet. So I then became the chief marketing officer. If you don't want to market for a company, don't ever get into marketing, because that has stuck with me through everything else. So I do handle all of our social media platforms for both the foundation and Phoenix. I would say AI has made that take a third of the time that it used to. So but I still probably spend a good 30% of my time in marketing. I spend a lot of time trying to help our program directors in various programs utilize technologies like Monday.com to align with each other and to shift from being kind of a let's just put out fires all the time to what is our quarterly strategy and what are the objectives and key results that are going to show us that we're actually achieving that strategy and moving the needle rather than just doing a bunch of busy work. And I would say I work probably on average a 12 to 16 hour day. I'll get about 30% of my time in there either interviewing other companies like nonprofits about what their big struggles are as I'm trying to launch this other company, or trying to figure out exactly what our tech stack is going to look like for that and build a business plan to get that off of the ground. I work virtually 1 day a week. I drive an hour both ways to Lafayette 4 days a week. I live in Carmel, Indiana, which is about an hour south of there. So anytime that I'm not actually engaged in work, I'm usually consuming either a podcast like yours or an ebook or something. I'm a huge believer in having a growth mindset, particularly at this time in history.
Super interesting. Super interesting. So, what type of technical infrastructure is critical to your operations? Do you feel like infrastructure, reliability of tools, speed, quality is a problem for you right now?
It is huge. I think it's a huge asset that I'm not seeing a lot of industries outside of tech and enterprise level industries use. And I could be wrong on that, but what I see around me, the conversations that I see around me and the use cases. So when I left Phoenix for 18 months and was a development director for the Salvation Army. When I came back, my boss envisioned me being kind of the program director over all the program managers. And I said, why don't we go chief strategy officer? Because really we need to have more of a transparent strategy that everyone's aligned with. And let's throw the word transformation in there, because I want everyone to know when I walk in the door that we're going to start transforming this company into a more digital-based company. So it's interesting because I have a good friend who's in experience design and does consulting for Disney and McKinsey and all kinds of huge companies, right? And he says he could walk into that company and say, let's plan to land on Venus in 2027. And everyone will be like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go. And then he'll say, let's change the way that we communicate about how we're going to do our daily task. And everyone's like, oh, we can't do that. We've been doing this the same way for the last 30 years. We're not changing. That's too big of a change for us, right? So those micro changes, like shifting to a platform like Monday.com, which is something that we've integrated since I got to Phoenix, that is not an easy shift. It's not easy to get everyone to buy in to the value in that. And it's also not easy to get people to use things that oftentimes I think, especially not just boots on the ground workers, but everybody, when you first integrate a new technology, there seems to be this attitude of, oh, one more thing I have to do, right? Rather than having the vision of, if I spend the time on the front end to learn how to use this tool, it's going to save me a ton of time in the future. There's a resistance to, I don't want to put the time into learning something new. And it's not just people in my generation, Gen X. I see it in millennials, and I even see it in some of the younger people that come into the company.
So it sounds like there's, a big challenge trying to get people to adopt to these things. And I think part of the urgency comes from realization of how fast things are going to be moving. So once you realize, okay, things are going to be moving a lot faster from here on out, I'd better try to stay ahead of things, or else I'm just going to get way left behind.
I think you're 100% right. I mean, for one thing, the whole work model has changed. And people don't stay with companies for a long time. So to have a mindset, I'm going to learn, let's just say Microsoft Suites. I'm going to learn how to do everything in Microsoft Suite, and then I'm going to be set on technology. Well, that's not really effective in today's world because there are new technologies coming out all the time. And if you shift companies or if you shift projects and are working with another company and collaborating, you're going to run into, maybe they communicate with Slack rather than communicating with email, or maybe they use Trello instead of Monday.com. I think in order to be really successful in today's world, you have to just keep this continuously growth mindset of, okay, I'm willing to learn how to adapt to these new technologies and quickly leverage them to make my life easier and augment my skills.
Do you feel overwhelmed by the tools that you're using? Do you feel like there are too many of them? There's a lot of clutter out there. And as these tools come out and teams are adopting them, is there some sort of technical burden that goes on in between managing all these different tools? That's a big problem with, I would say, physicians in clinics or hospitals. They have to do a lot of documentation manually, and it causes them to spend less time with patients. So do you think there should be more tools for us to use and utilize? Or do you think okay, there needs to be a smarter way to approach this?
I think it's twofold. I think the technology world is starting to offer solutions to that. Now, when you talk about a HIPAA compliant or a healthcare agency, there are issues with the tools talking to each other. All right, that seems to have become what the way to manage that is. What are my plugins? What can talk to what? And so yes, to your original question, I did feel overwhelmed for a while. I was, especially when all the different AIs started coming out. When I started exploring project management tools, I was looking at Jira, I was looking at Trello, I was looking at Monday.com, and all of a sudden now I've got a Kanban board open here and Agile project management open here, and my head's just going, what is all this, right? But I do find that large language models are actually helpful for this. So I can go into Copilot, or I can go into GPT and say, this is what my company does. this is what our aptitude is. What tech stack do you recommend? And then that gives me a framework of what to start exploring. And then I have really started to pay attention to, okay, what plugs into what works well with what. I think that I've got to have technologies that talk to each other if I don't want to be overwhelmed all the time. And let AI do some of that on the back end rather than me jumping around with 50 windows open all the time, trying to go from one to the other. A lot of them are very compatible with each other and talk to each other. Again, there's a learning curve on the front end of that, but I think once you learn how to do that, it can really reduce the burden of feeling overwhelmed by too many different apps.
Super interesting. So, how can healthcare companies who know healthcare really well, how can they properly utilize AI? Say, without a team of AI engineers and whatnot, how would they be able to do that and make it actually work for them?
So I would say on the front end, so if you're talking about a smaller entity, right? If you're talking about a big enterprise level entity, they're already doing it. There it becomes an ethical issue of when you were talking about doctors having to spend so much time taking notes or talking to healthcare instead of in front of a patient. Well, there was a book called AI in Healthcare that shows that doctors, your average physician spends 7 minutes with a patient. 4 minutes of that is note taking, and 3 minutes of it is actual human interaction. The question that healthcare entities have to answer is if AI can replace that 4 minutes, if it can take those notes for you, are you going to allow that doctor to then spend 7 minutes talking to a patient, or are you going to expect him to see 2 patients in every 7 minutes? So are you going to give that time back to the actual patient care, or are you going to try to double your revenue? Right. And that's an ethical question that I think a lot of industries are going to have to tackle. But smaller agencies like my own, I'm with the early adapters of AI. Really just start exploring it, start playing with it, right? It's obviously a lot of these models are open models, so you don't want to give it a bunch of information about your particular company that you don't want out there. But you can just say, hey, help me write this email better. Help me align my calendar better. I do a lot of trainings that integrate design thinking. And I will say, this is a training that I want to do. This is the amount of time I have. This is the outcome I want. Help me design this training. And it's amazing what they will do. So I think the very first step is just start familiarizing yourself with talking to AI, because prompt engineering is definitely a skill set, right? Crap in, crap out is definitely true. If I don't know how to talk to it, then it's not going to give me what I want. But once I learn how to craft prompts, not only can I save myself a lot of time by having those prompts ready to go, but I can also get a lot better outcomes out of those models.
Super interesting. I mean, I can't wait to hear the feedback from some of the physician leaders in the community about where that extra 4 minutes will go. So is cybersecurity a concern for you right now? Because as AI gets better and better, that's only going to help hackers build better and better mechanisms to pretty much break into your vault. So do you feel like that's a big issue, or do you think there's going to be like a lot of sitting ducks around soon? How do you think this is going to pan out?
So I think that's where your next level AI integration comes in, right? Once you've figured out how to use it for stuff that's not protected information or information that you don't want out, then as a company you have to say, okay, how am I going to figure out what the return on investment is and what's worth spending money both to build a security system around and to get privatized AI into my systems to help me do things. One way that I have found that a lot of companies can do that without spending a ton of money is to partner with local community colleges or colleges and let their interns and their students come in and advise you on that. But the problem is, in my industry, we're all stretched very thin. So again, I come with the pushback of, well, we don't have time to spend with these students going through this whole process. Okay, Do you have $20,000 to spend to give a consulting agency to come in and do the same thing that is hands off, but is going to cost you a whole lot of money? I think that's where you kind of have to figure out. And for an industry like mine, it would be much, much more worth our time to bring those students in and let them advise us on what our next steps in technology will be. I have not been able to successfully integrate that in my company yet, but that's where I'm looking.
Super interesting. So I'm pretty sure everyone is noticing the impact that AI has had in the past year or so. But with the recent release, as of 2 weeks ago, the latest multimodal AI GPTs have been released. What do you have any thoughts around multimodal AI versus traditional LLMs, what most people are familiar with? Multimodal in the sense the AI can speak, it can hear, it can see, and do all sorts of different things too.
I think it's amazing. So on the marketing front, GPT is the only AI platform I pay for, but it saves me so much time. That hour drive that I have between here and Lafayette, I can talk to GPT and have it draft all of my social media for the week, right? So think about the amount of time that I used to spend sitting in a computer trying to figure out what am I gonna post about, what am I gonna write, and when it first, just 18 months ago, when I would do this, I would have to go back and rewrite a lot of it. I mean, GPT in particular used to sound like a 14-year-old cheerleader was like excited about everything, and it didn't really sound that human, right? Now, between Claude and GPT, I can draft stuff that I would seriously doubt anyone can tell I didn't write without changing it much at all. And if I can do that, talking to it rather than having to sit and type with it, it saves me a ton of time. I also find that GPT's new text-to-image model is far better than DALL-E was. What I was seeing with Midjourney and DALL-E was if you were an artist, you knew how to prompt engineer a prompt to get something decent out of DALL-E, right? But if you weren't, all I would get was those spacey looking, like I could tell AI made this cheesy images. Whereas with the new model, I just said the other day, create me an image of a young man leading an event design class with canvases. That was one sentence, and it came up with a perfect picture of a class full of people in a room with a lit window, canvases on the wall, words spelled right. Like, I was amazed at how much easier it was to use the text to image. I don't think Canva has a very good text to image yet, but they're all works in progress.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like just adopting to the usage of AI tools. It's not going to be a one-stop thing where you finish AI, you're done, you move on to the next step. I think AI in healthcare is actually going to be more like a journey that everybody's going to go on. So it's super interesting. So what are the top 3 most critical technological improvements that you would want to make to have the most impact for you in 2024?
I'm going to take this from starting a company standpoint, okay, because this is kind of a big consideration. First off, I think Microsoft used to be the suite, right? Most businesses operate out of a Microsoft suite. And then it has all the thousands of apps that it offers. And to me, Microsoft, you can tell it's a Bill Gates company. I mean, it's very analytical based, right? From their project management tool to Teams to anything in there. I'm more of a creative, and I've never been a big fan of the Microsoft suite. Things like Canva are starting to build out their platforms to an enterprise level where they have HR tools. They can plug in with Slack. They can plug in with Miro, which is a whiteboard. Like, I think that figuring out what you want the base of your tech stack to be based on what your workload is and the type of company culture you have is an essential. From there, I do think that every company should have some form of relating their strategy to their entire company and making sure that everyone understands that and is aligned with it. I'm a big fan of OKRs, objectives and key results. And then my number one tool beyond marketing is going to be my project management tool. Is it user friendly? If I was trying to develop software, I would definitely have Jira. It is set up for people who think along the agile process software development, right? If you've got a bunch of young people who love Kanban, Trello might be where you want to be. If you've got a big mix of people and you just need something that looks good and is easy to navigate, Monday.com is definitely the way to go. But if I was to pick the wrong one, I would take my chances of integrating it company-wide from 40% to 10%. Right? If people can't understand it or it doesn't resonate with the way they work, they're definitely not going to. And then AI. I mean, you can't leave AI. It's almost like AI has become a part of everything now. I know under the surface it was a part of a lot of things before, but it's visibly a part of everything now. From when I write a LinkedIn post and it asks me if I want AI to rewrite it, to when I use Grammarly and it annoys me with the fact that it does not like adjectives very well anymore, but wants to rewrite it for me all the time. AI is everywhere. So I would say the most important thing in the technology world, whether you're a CFO or you're a nurse, is just start exploring AI and become familiar with it, because there will become a point in time where if you are unable to adequately interface with AI, you're going to be way behind the curve.
Very, very, very intriguing. For sure, I completely agree. Figuring out how to best utilize this new power that AI has given everybody is going to be a big game changer. So, if you had some advice for healthcare organizations or any org that's working in healthcare, how would you recommend they should go on about implementing AI at their org? Should they do this in-house, hire certain specialized people, or do you think they should have a partner to do that for them? What do you think is the best way to approach that?
I think there are many ways to approach it, but I think you definitely have to have a strategic plan for approaching it. So, for instance, with my own business, where we want to do consulting and use design, like I'm starting to notice that starting a small business like that, if you don't have a software component to it, you're probably not going to have a company that you can scale and sell within 5 to 10 years. So my partner and I, who are equal partners starting this, have decided, well, let's find someone who wants to develop software and bring them in as a third party and get somebody technical here, right? If on the small business side, I think you have a decision to make. You should be hiring people and technology should be a question in your hiring process, right? How tech friendly are you? How willing are you to learn new technology? I don't care if you can code or not, but are you willing to adapt new technology as it comes along? And if you're not, then you're probably going to be a strain on my business. Two, if you can hire people in who have the skills you're looking for, but also have those other skills, those are super valuable, right? So leverage that and let them start exploring and making some recommendations. Make them, even if they're a boots on the ground employee, but they have all kinds of tech knowledge, make them part of your strategic planning process with your C-suite so that they can advise you. Bring your boards in on it, whether you're for-profit or non-profit. Bring your boards into this conversation. In the big enterprise level healthcare space, there are some ethical questions that are going to have to be answered. I mean, yes, AI will soon be able to tell a nurse or a doctor or anyone who's having a conversation with someone, hey, you're not being really empathetic. Hey, you're not really following best practices. But I've been in healthcare for a few years. Trying to tell a nurse or a doctor that they're not doing something right isn't easy if you have the same letters behind your name as them. It's almost impossible if you're not at the same level as them credential-wise. So to think that a machine's going to be able to do it, I think that there's going to be a big hurdle to overcome there as to whether or not they listen to the advice that's being provided that could actually improve their care model. I think that they have to look at where they're going to put their time back in. And then security is a huge issue with anyone that has protected information and could get sued. So that's kind of the barrier for smaller companies that's going to be hard to overcome. How do I integrate this with the level of security that I need? Because a HIPAA violation for a small company can put you out of business. For a huge company, it just means it's going to cost you a lot of money, right? But for smaller businesses, it could put you out of business.
Wow, what an adventure. I mean, my concluding thoughts are that AI has a big role to play in healthcare this year. Implementing AI really well will provide the most impact out of anything. It was such a pleasure having you on the show, Jason. I'm looking forward to having you on for future episodes.
I would love it. I'm going to be an avid listener to your podcast, and I'm happy to weigh in anytime. It is an exciting time, and I think that I will have to say, as a Gen Xer, as a 51-year-old man, this is the first time I've ever been an early adopter of anything. So I'm kind of stoked about that.